Good afternoon, everyone. I know you've been listening to a lot of presentations all day, so we'll try and make this as painless as possible. There's been a lot of focus this year on how airlines are accessing congested infrastructure, even more so than perhaps we've seen in previous years. And indeed, we do remain in exactly the same situation, a capacity crisis. So we'd like today to explain and bring some realities to how the airlines are actually accessing that congested infrastructure, how the new entrant rule works and how the allocation works through the coordinators. First though, we'd like to show you a short video which we think nicely explains and recaps how the whole slot coordination process works.
What are airport slots and why do we need them? More than 200 of the world's busiest airports are congested. There's more demand for flights than there is available runway and terminal capacity. So to tackle this, the declared capacity at congested airports is parceled into slots. The airlines then sit down to plan their schedules and see what slots they should use. An independent slot coordinator allocates the slots using a set of rules, the worldwide slot guidelines. This makes the process transparent and fair. The worldwide slot guidelines aims to provide enough certainty to give customers confidence and to enable airlines to invest in routes, create opportunities for new airlines to enter busy airports and provide more choice for consumers, and be harmonized worldwide so that the global aviation system can function effectively. So, how does it work? Zenda Airways, operating from its hub airport in Ruritania, is allocated a slot at 8 a.m., which it uses to fly to Paris. The flight takes 2 hours. To be sure this flight can work, Zenda Airways needs to know that it has a slot to land in Paris at 10 a.m. So they sit down with the slot coordinator for Paris, who confirms that the 10 a.m. time is available. Zenda Airways now has its aircraft in Paris, so it needs to arrange a return flight, using an available slot from Paris, landing in Ruritania 2 hours later. The Paris slot coordinator says it can have a midday flight, but the Ruritania slot coordinator says that the 2 p.m. landing slot is already taken. Zenda Airways now has 2 options. It can look for a different departure slot for Paris, or it can contact the airline that has the 2 p.m. landing time in Ruritania to see if they're willing to move. Fortunately for Zenda, the airline using the 2 p.m. landing slot can move their flight 15 minutes later. This frees up the 2 p.m. slot, which Zenda Airways uses for its return flight from Paris. You can see that this is a complicated system to administer. Each airline must manage perhaps thousands of flights across its network, and each coordinator must manage thousands of slots at its airport. And this must be done twice a year for the summer season and winter season schedules. Obviously, starting each slot negotiation process from scratch every 6 months would be an almost impossible task. Therefore, a series of rules has emerged through the WSG to reduce the burden. An example is that if an airline has successfully used its slot the previous season, then it can use the same slot again. This is called grandfather rights. Under the WSG, if an airline uses its slot 80% of the time, it is permitted to retain the slot the following season. Season-on-season consistency of schedules is also important for consumers and businesses. A Ruritania company with an office in Paris can be sure its managers can attend meetings there, and its cargo can reach the city by 10 a.m. A Paris visitor attraction can start marketing in Ruritania, confident that a regular air connection exists between the 2 countries. What about new airlines? New low-cost airline, Ruritania Air, has started up and wants access to the airport. How can it do that? Option 1. The airport reviews its capacity and announces that it has 2 more slots per hour. WSG rules state that at least 50% of new capacity must be available to new entrant airlines. In this case, Ruritania Air applies to the slot coordinator for one of the new slots. Option 2. A slot becomes available because an existing airline decides it no longer wishes to operate that slot. Ruritania Air can then apply to operate it. Option 3. An airline may obtain the slot they need by swapping slots with another carrier. This is called slot mobility, and enables greater flexibility for carriers to optimize their schedules or new routes to be developed at highly congested airports. The result of these rules is to create a balance between creating a strong, consistent network of routes while giving opportunities for new carriers to enter the market. Proof of this is that in Europe, over the last decade, the market share of low-cost carriers has grown to 40%, and routes where 2 or more carriers compete have increased to 30%. Aviation is a global industry, and we need a global approach to slots. However, it is worth remembering that slot coordination can only manage the best of the capacity that is available. It cannot create new capacity. The only solution for reducing congestion at airports is to create more capacity, either by building more runways and terminals or improving air traffic control.
Good afternoon. So now that you have become slot experts in 5 minutes, we're going to dive into the access question and how it actually works, and most importantly of all, why we believe that it still works today. If we look at this graph, you will see that the growth of congested airports around the world has been increasing year after year, and now with more than 200 congested airports worldwide, this poses a serious constraint in the industry. We have also looked into the future, and realistically there could be 100 more airports added to those 200 existing ones by 2030. Now this is a significant problem not only for the airlines but also for the customers, for the consumer, because this reduces flexibility in scheduling. It also decreases the possibility for airlines to provide new and expanded routes, and also it's a concern because of non-optimal operations. We also have to point out that only 9% of the world's level 2 and level 3 airports actually provide 69% of global flights. So the importance of slot coordination is extremely important. What is the whole? What are we talking about here? Why there has been so much attention recently? Yes, there is a capacity crunch, and yes, airlines compete for slots due to lack of capacity. But the slot rules are not broken, and actually they are there to remedy the situation and provide access and ability for the airlines to provide services to the customers. So what are we doing to address the current problems? Well, first and foremost, we have conducted a strategic review of the existing slot guidelines together with the Association of the Airports, Airport Council International, and the Association of the Coordinators, the Worldwide Airport Coordinators Group, and we have enhanced and improved the current slot guidelines. Also, in addition to this review, we have implemented a new governance structure on how the slot guidelines are actually produced, reviewed and enhanced, and the airports and coordinators are part of this joint effort in the future. In 2020 we will see the introduction of the renamed Worldwide Airport Slot Guidelines, which will be jointly published by IATA, ACI and WWACG. But now going back to the rules for accessing congested infrastructure, very importantly, the airports, airlines and coordinators have already improved and significantly changed the guidelines with regards to access. And first and foremost, this is a change of how many airlines can qualify as new entrants. We've made it easier for more airlines to become new entrants. Also, we have expanded the coordinators list of allocation decision criteria to promote competition and growth. And also, we have reformed the initial pools of capacity and the order of allocation to achieve fairer access, also through new rules, and most importantly, this is aimed to meet the consumer needs. You may ask, what are the objectives of slot coordination? Why do we have it? Why is it currently there? Well, the slot process must be fit for purpose and remain relevant in order to provide to the consumer what they want, when they want it, and at the price they're willing to pay. And that is why the objectives of slot coordination are actually focused on facilitating consumer choice for air services, improving the global connectivity and enhancing competition, but also providing consumers with convenient schedules that meet the demand and also that they are consistent from season to season and they are reliable in terms of their operability. Airline schedules and connectivity rely on a stable and consistent system that is applied worldwide by all stakeholders, and here what we mean is by coordinators, by regulators, and by governments. It is important that the slot guidelines are harmonized globally because they provide the security and the certainty that schedules can be operated by the airlines, and at the end of the day that they can provide the services that are demanded by the consumer. I'm now going to hand back to Lara, who will explain to you how the access to congested airport actually works and why do we believe that the process today is not broken and it actually works.
Thanks, Dimiter. So we've heard that the slot process is all about using capacity well, and airlines are obviously focusing on delivering schedules that passengers actually want to fly. They're doing great things with the slots they have, but do they want more? Of course. They want to provide consumers more choice at better fares with new destinations and better connectivity. And when we look at some of the specifics behind the slot process and how it's working, we believe it's delivering that. We often refer to the European airports as a case in point on how the WSG is applied because the regulation in Europe closely follows this. They also house 50% of the world's slot-coordinated airports today. When we look at some figures, like the ones on the screen, we can see that even though these airports are some of the most congested in the world, the airlines are still able to dynamically change their schedules season upon season and reflect the consumer's demand. Indeed, in 10 years, they've managed to grow routes by 32% at these congested hubs. And as we all know in Europe, that's without an awful lot of additional capacity being made available to them. I think this is significant in terms of how the process is working, but even more demonstration of how airlines are actually able to access these congested hubs. So on the screen there's a selection of global coordinated airports, and these airports have been coordinated for over the last few decades. But very recently we've seen the emergence of low-cost, long-haul carriers into these airports. How have they done that? Because the new entrant rule has allowed them to not only gain access at these very congested airports, but also grow and expand their route offering. So as you can see, from one season to the next, over the last couple of years, these airports have seen a strong growth in the low-cost, long-haul market because of the rules that are applied there today. And these airlines are then able to offer consumers fares that they want to see on these routes, new connectivity, and indeed new destinations. So how do the rules actually work? I'm not going to go into the technicalities of all of this, but just to do a quick overview of how the coordination actually ends up in a saleable schedule each year for the airlines. When there's more demand than can be met, we've already heard it's the slot coordinator's job to allocate the capacity at the airport to the airlines that have applied for it fairly, transparently, and very importantly, in a very non-discriminatory manner. How do they do this? Because we have rules. These rules that are called the WSG, the Worldwide Slot Guidelines. They are fair, transparent, and indeed now include the airports as well in terms of how they're leveraged. And although we have this global guidance in place, and all coordinators hopefully follow it, it doesn't mean that the end result is the same. Because the rules set the framework for how the coordinators work, it certainly doesn't inform the requests that they receive each season for that capacity. So every season, the winter or the summer, the coordinators are sitting down with the pool of capacity they have available, and they look at the requests that have been made for that next season. And every season this could be different. The requests depend on consumer demand, the fuel price, the fleet plans the airlines have and indeed the aircraft orders they have, but also the state of the external economy, the local economy and consumer demand, as well as other factors. So the slot coordinators, with their pool, first divide this up 50-50 between the new entrant carriers that will have applied and the incumbent carriers that already have existing operations at that airport. But that's where the proportionality in splitting the capacity stops. Indeed, the coordinator does not proportionately allocate the slots by the existing airlines that already reside in those airports. It's all about the requests that they receive for that season and how most fairly and most competitively they can allocate them. So this is to ensure a number of factors are met. Competition, frequency of services, what the consumers want in that local market, how to offer new destinations, and also how to best use the capacity that's available in the most sustainable way. And you'll recall from Dimiter that we've already now started to enhance these rules, and airlines that qualify for this first 50%, the first new entrant slot pool, have now been expanded to carriers that have can actually access the airport with a greater slot holding before they move into the secondary pool of allocation. However, even with all this framework in place, it's very difficult, as I said, to allocate and then predict what the outcome will be one season to the next, because the requests do change so much. So with new capacity coming online at some airports, there's been talk of airlines being able to predict the outcomes, and as the airlines say, this is impossible, as the coordinators would say as well. What the makeup of an airport will look like in the future is very dynamic and cannot be predicted. So if anyone tells you that they can work out who's going to be operating that Heathrow third runway, I'd tell them they have as much chance as predicting the outcome of Brexit at this stage. And here's the proof that it is working. Norwegian have recently, I think all of you may be aware, published that they've been allocated slots at Heathrow, the so-called fortress hub. And this is without any new capacity being made available at that airport, because some slots were returned to the pool. They, as a new entrant, were given priority access to these slots as somebody that can come into Heathrow and offer a different type of service, a different product, and potentially, we don't know yet, to a different market. They're going to launch that service for next summer, and they've got those slots out of the pool completely free of charge. So I think this is good proof that where there is capacity made available, yes, indeed, carriers can get access and then grow their operation. And the WSG actually allows them to grow their operation to a competitive state because it has criteria that enable them, one season to the next, to grow on the slots that they already have, should there ever be more capacity made available. So just to recap, it's obviously critical for airlines that they can continue to access congested infrastructure, grow existing services, and indeed offer new services to support the sustainable growth of this industry. But for airports already facing a capacity crunch, they don't have many options other than to look for slot allocation to optimise the way that they can manage their slots today. It is the only solution to prevent chaos and ensure the airlines, one season to the next, can publish schedules that consumers want and need. We are continuously improving the slot guidelines, and we're making sure that they're fit for purpose. We are looking forward to this new era in slot policy definition, including the airports and the coordinators and the airlines together in the room, looking to define how the industry will work in the future. But, as we always say, slot coordination is only a solution that matches the imperfectness of not having enough capacity in the first place. It doesn't generate new capacity, it only manages what's there. And it is first aid to the capacity problem overall. So without growth and long-term investment in infrastructure, we are going to be using this guideline for some time more. Thank you very much for your attention. I know it's getting late in the day. I think we'll now take some questions if anybody has any.